Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cannversation, where we intend to destigmatize the conversation around cannabis, to talk a little sports, and of course, we hope have a little fun along the way. I'm your host, Dave Briggs, former CNN, NBC Sports, Fox News anchor, as well as a host at Turner Sports as well. And one trend that is certainly helping in that regard is current and or former athletes jumping into the cannabis industry, in particular from the NBA, but boy, is the NFL coming on strong in that regard. We talked to Calvin Johnson, the Hall of Famer, in the debut episode of the show tonight, the all-time leading receiver in Giants history in terms of yards, receptions, and touchdown receptions. He is the man in Giants history and also a Super Bowl champion. Amani Toomer with us tonight. Amani, good to see you, my friend. What I love about your cannabis story is that you were very late to the party. Why so?
Well, I was always, the stigma that that came with that's come with cannabis is always something that I really believe. And then, I got into the business, I started investing in it. And then I started really doing my research on what this plant was, what was THC, what was CBD. And I started, then I learned about the whole human cannabinoid system and how it's a system in our body that they don't even teach in medical schools. And I was really like, this is not what they told me it was. I felt like I've been lied to. So then, I still wasn't going into the full THC mode. I was into the CBD because I cycle a lot and I had, really bad repetitive stress injuries. I had bad knees, I have bad back and neck. And, it was really starting to affect my ability to kind of work out. And so I started taking CBD and it was amazing. Like all the pain went away in my body and I was able to work out like I did, not like when I played, but more so of what I'm used to working out and the level of the intensity. And I was like, man, if CBD is this good, what is THC and CBD going to be? So then I started, and I'm not really a big smoker or anything. Yeah. I sometimes I'll have the gummies, or I'll have a pen, like a vape pen, one or two things off a vape pen. But yeah, I'm not really big into smoking, but just because of the fact that, I tried it every once in a while, but I still, I grew up in the 80s. My parents were smokers and I hated the fact that they smoked. So yeah, the smoking aspect of it doesn't do well.
I gotta be honest. I think you are the perfect guy for this show and for this story, because everyone just perceives that everyone in the cannabis world or anyone that enjoys THC is just taking giant bong rips on the couch, eating Cheetos and not moving for 8 hours. That is not what cannabis is all about, is it, Amani?
Absolutely not. It is a medicine. And, I've invested in a lot of different cannabis medical cannabis operations. And it's a you listen to the cancer aspects, all the stuff with Crohn's disease, all these different ailments that this, medicine can really help with. And it's just amazing. And, you start reading and you start listening and you read about the history of it and why they made it, why the prohibition first came out. And, I tell people, have you ever heard of a guy named Harry Anslinger? Yep. And everybody's like, no. I was like, this guy was a devout racist. And one of the reasons why he wanted to outlaw cannabis was he said it made Black people feel equal to white people. And I'm just like, and that's in the record. That's not like what I thought he said. That's in the actual record when you're doing this research. And it blew my mind. And then that started, once you dig deeper into this whole cannabis prohibition, you really start to see some of the undercurrents of systematic racism in this country.
It's fucking insane. If you want to know more about that Anslinger story and the racism about the history, please check out our episode with Dr. Carl Hart from Columbia, who studied this stuff for 30 years. He's written books on it. That episode is on Pro-Cannabis Media. It's on our YouTube page as well, and it is really informative. So we're going to circle back to your experience, starting with THC in your 40s and the stigma, but I want to hit on some quick week 1 NFL stories because I'm still jacked about football being back, about fans in the stadium, and about my Denver Broncos over my shoulder here, beating your Giants. I enjoyed that a lot. Your Giants, boy, it's just been a floundering couple of years. Let's start with Daniel Jones. Played solid, but another costly turnover. He has 40 in 28 games. That continues to be the problem with him. Do you believe he's going to be the man, or is it about time that the clock has expired on Daniel Jones?
I mean, it's the first game of the year, but there has to be some improvement. I like the fact that he says all the right things. He's like the perfect face of the franchise. But if you turn the ball over, I mean, there's nothing that anybody can do. I mean, you turn the ball over, you cost your team victories. You could be the best guy in the world. You could be a Boy Scout. You could be a Eagle Scout. It's about production on the field. And I know everybody in the Giant organization is behind him. I'm behind him. But at a certain point in time, which is not yet, but 5-6 games down the road, if he's still doing these types of things, you take the choice out of everybody's hand. I think that a lot of people are going to go down if he doesn't perform better, not just Daniel Jones, but maybe even the general manager. I think the head coach just got there and they really like the head coach, but the general manager, the more he plays terribly, the more he struggles, I should say, it's a better word. The more he struggles, and the more the general manager kind of, Dave Gettleman really backed this kid, getting rid of Eli Manning prematurely. A lot of people didn't like the way it happened for this guy, and he's not holding his water. It's going to be a tough situation for old Dave Gettleman.
Saquon Barkley. We're all rooting for Saquon, but boy, it didn't look pretty, man. 10 carries, 26 yards. He played 28 snaps. He didn't have a single carry over 5 yards. He looks washed, but I know he's still coming back from an injury. Do you think he will turn the corner?
I think he'll turn the corner. He flashed with a nice one-handed grab. Those are the types of things that he does. I don't think you can really judge him off of the limited amount of carries. He's one of those backs like Barry Sanders that, he'll have 5 carries where you're like, is this guy any good? And then next thing you know, bam, he'll break a long run and he'll shake somebody or do something incredible. So he's one of those guys that you just got to give him the ball more. You can't, he's not one of these, 3 carry games, 5 carry games, 10 carry games. He needs a lot of touches to really show his talent. And, it's going to take a while for that knee to come back. I've had an ACL. It takes a full calendar year for the ACL to fully heal and get all that proprioception back, because there's little muscles in there that just, I remember from one day to the next, my coach saw me playing after my ACL, and so I was moving just better. And I had more quickness. I had more explosion. And at running back position is one of the hardest to come back from an ACL.
I think the doubt comes in with Saquon because the games he played prior to the injury last year, he looked very mediocre at best, but he is a phenomenal human being and a specimen. I hope he battles back. What was your biggest surprise from week 1 in the NFL season?
I would say you gotta look at how Jameis Winston played. That was a really big surprise.
5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, that guy has been through everything. Everybody thinks he's a terrible quarterback, but the guy threw 30 touchdowns a couple of years ago. You could couple that with 30 interceptions, but still
30.
That's still a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I know Sean Payton, he was my offensive coordinator with the Giants. He's a quarterback guru. The guy knows how to get the best out of people. And he's a guy that I always think was a really good Sean Payton. I'm talking about was a very good judge of talent. I remember when Tom Brady was coming out, and the discussion, because I was around the facility a lot, and the discussion around was because Tom Brady looked terrible in the combines. We've all seen his combine pictures, and everybody was talking about how Tom Brady was terrible, but there was only one of our coaches that said, I think Tom Brady can be a star. and that was Sean Payton. He was the only one that believed in him. And I think he's a tremendous judge of talent. Nobody believed in Drew Brees until he went with Sean Payton, because they thought he was washed up when he left the Chargers. So there's something to the fact that he is a very good judge of quarterback talent. And the fact that he picked Jameis Winston, to me, knowing the history of Sean Payton, tells me that Jameis Winston is going to go down in the right path.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that story about Sean Payton, because yes, nobody thought Brady would be what he is. I would love to. Do you know what it was that he saw in Brady? Because he was slow, still is, skinny, did not look like an athlete, has never had that strong of arm. I'm curious what Payton saw in him.
I think I look at quarterback more as an art, not a science, right? You look at how tough Tom Brady had to be going through a situation at Michigan where he was being benched and then he was coming in and saving games. That is not, like, most quarterbacks don't have that mental power to do that. They can't mentally, switch on off like that and not go in the tank. So I think he saw that, and the guy's a winner. Like, one of these games, they came back and beat Alabama, and one of these Orange Bowl games, he's just a guy that he's ultra competitive. I mean, and you got to be able to see through. It's part of the talent of being a scout, or a talent evaluator.
Yeah.
You look at every situation. It's not all about stats.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, the guy's my age. We are the same age. I can barely play hoops with my son, who's 13. He goes 380 yards and 4 touchdowns at age 44. And everybody in the stadium and across the country knew the Bucs were going to win when the Cowboys took the lead with 90 seconds left. It's the weirdest sensation I've ever seen in sports. Everybody knew Brady was going to win that game. But I thought the biggest surprise of the week was that Jameis Winston game, but it wasn't Winston. It was the worst team in the NFL on Sunday, hands down, and it was the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, yeah.
Think of Aaron Rodgers and of Green Bay, outclassed in every facet of football.
I just can't believe that they fell from grace so quickly. I mean, this is a team that was one game away from the Super Bowl. And then now all of a sudden they're, at the bottom of the barrel. It just seems, I don't know how you can underestimate the Saints with all the firepower that they have and come in and lay a stinker like that. Maybe it's one of these situations like the first game of the year, the preseason wasn't normal. You think you got 17 games, in the bag. Yeah, maybe I can't figure out why you come out and perform that poorly.
Well, the theory is that Rodgers, his entire offseason was about drama, about wanting to leave Green Bay. He wasn't focused on football. He certainly wasn't having a Tom Brady type of offseason where he's studying and working with receivers. Do you think that just distracted him? The guy came out with a ponytail, for crying out loud.
Yeah, the man bun is not a good look. Not a good look. It could have, and it makes sense to, but who knows how focused he really was. I mean, yeah. I think Aaron Rodgers takes pride in what he does. You can't play for this many years and be at that high of a level, coming off the MVP. I don't think he took it easy. I just think that he had a bad day, but it was surprising. But you know what? One of the things that when I was doing the Sirius NFL radio, one of the hosts was like, when you have a great quarterback is when they play poorly and you're truly surprised that they play poorly. That just shows you how kind of great they really are. So we'll see throughout the season. I have a suspicion that Aaron Rodgers is going to regress to the mean, and he's going to be the great quarterback that he's always been.
It was one awful performance. I want to ask you about another guy that you're very familiar with that we talk about reaching their potential, and he's never quite gotten there. And of course, it's Odell Beckham Jr., who left New York, went to Cleveland, a lot of hype, never realized it, got injured last year, was inactive in week 1. You're a guy that went out there and worked your ass off day in and day out and got better and improved and worked 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons you had from 99 to 03. Beckham himself, one of the most gifted athletes we've ever seen, is not achieving those type of numbers. Will he ever realize his great potential?
Wow, that is a great question. I think that he already has realized a lot of his potential, but my brother and I always say, if you're a receiver that wants to be, upper echelon, it's not about how you play when you're young. It's how you play after your first major injury, because it's going to happen. And so it's kind of a phase in his career where in the beginning, everything was easy. You're the better athlete. You're coming out of college. Your body's fresh. But have a couple of those NFL seasons start hanging over you, catch an injury or two. That's where kind of, that extra talent is going to have to turn into better technique, better work ethic. I don't know if he has bad work ethic, but I'm just saying, to get to that next level, there has to be a work ethic, and you have to constantly be improving your game to where you become more efficient. Because when I was younger, I could run by people, I could do all this, but when I got older and slower, I was forced to use tricks. I was forced to use technique. And if you aren't on that level to where you're concentrating on those types of things, that's why there's some players that come in the league and they're fired, they're flashes in the pan, because they do well, and then all of a sudden defenses started changing towards and started getting the double teams, and they can't figure anything out. They can't be successful after that. And so you're constantly improving, and if you're not, you're not going to get better. And with the injuries, all these types of things are constantly changing in your career, and you constantly got to be ahead of the curve and improving every day, every game, every year. And if you're not, you're getting worse.
And you got to stop worrying about your brand. And he's been awfully concerned about that brand for the last several years, wearing a watch on the field and all the madness, nonstop pregame rituals and suspensions and fines. And I again, another guy we hope achieves his potential, but at this point, it's entirely unclear. So speaking of injuries, a lot of players now using cannabis to recover from a lot of those head injuries. We talked to Kyle Turley about it. He's suffering from early dementia and CTE, and cannabis has been the thing that's helped him level out and deal with those head injuries. But for you, that didn't bring you to cannabis. And I'm surprised at that. When you were playing, was it around in the locker rooms? Were a lot of guys smoking? And what was that stigma that you mentioned earlier that kept you from trying it?
Well, I was always under the impression that was a gateway drug, that it was a gateway to the next level. So I just never got involved in it at all. But was it around? I don't remember it being around. Maybe the guys when I wasn't around were smoking, and I'm sure they were. But no, I never was around it. And growing up in Berkeley, I remember when I was Berkeley, California, I was offered a joint when I was, I think, second grade, third grade. And so it wasn't something that was completely foreign to me. It was just something that, I grew up in the 80s, and this is your brain on drugs type thing, and I thought it was like a real drug. I didn't think it was a difference between cocaine and marijuana. Like, to me, they were both the same, and so I didn't touch any of it. And so as you get older and you do some reading and all this stuff, and the fact that it does help brain injuries, to me, it was something that, one other reason why I said, you know what, I might go ahead and try this, because, I've had a couple concussions, and, they say it helps. So, there's nothing else that they know out there that can really help brain injuries. So I tried it.
So what was that first time like? And what was the light bulb going on moment for you?
I honestly, the first time I did it, I didn't know if it did anything, because being drunk, drinking too much alcohol and having a buzz, and having a buzz from cannabis is two different things. Like, I was like, am I really, is it really happening, or is it just in my brain? I don't really, I still, to this day, sometimes I'm like, does this really even do anything? And then you start laughing and you start thinking of crazy, funny things, and you
Yeah.
start having a really good time off of stuff that shouldn't be that funny. And I'm like, okay, it must be doing something.
That does sounds familiar. Yeah, for everybody, it's something different. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
it's not as much about being high as it is taking out the lows, because
Yeah.
that's what cannabis does for me, is take out the lows, take out the dips. Now, being high on occasion is certainly great, but taking out the dips is more important. So you got involved in the medical industry, and tell me about that. Colorado, Nevada, and I think in New Jersey as well. At
Yeah.
what level and how involved with it are you?
Well, I'm mostly in the investor side, and I'm
Yep.
trying to, I look for opportunities all the time that makes sense, strategic sense. So right now, I'm really happy with what's going on. Obviously, that it's a tough business in terms of getting companies cash flow positive, and because of the banking issue, because of the
Safe
tax
banking.
codes and stuff like that,
Yep.
and the tax codes, it's very hard to to not only make money, but it's hard to bank, which is even if you do make money, it's cash. And then I never really knew how hard it was to walk around with a whole bunch of cash, you not be able to put it in the bank, not be able to do anything with it. So it's a little challenging, but I think once the banking industry gets on board, and hopefully when they legalize it federally, it'll just explode into something that can really help a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Do you think federal legalization happens soon? And do you think it's an entirely good thing? You said to me earlier that you think there's a place for everybody in this industry. And I agree with
Yeah.
you. My fear is with federal legalization, if it happens soon, you could get 4 or 5 companies that snap up everything and it becomes Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts. And yes, there will still be some coffee shops across the country, but it'll be the big guys that put most of the little guys out of business.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's if you're involved in any of the licensing processes, the MSOs, the multi-state operators are doing just that. So it's not something that is new. It's not something that is surprising. But I think the cannabis user is a little bit different from, say, somebody who is just like somebody who's just wanting to get the effects, like somebody who's an alcoholic or something, or somebody who wants to drink a lot of alcohol. It's a very niche thing. Like, people like their flavors, they like their terpene profiles, and the plant is hard to grow well. It's easy to grow, hard to grow well, and make it consistent and to get the full expression of the plant. So there's always going to be room for people that looking like to try to grow very high-end, high-quality stuff, just like it is, Ace of Spades and all these different kinds of high-end champagnes and whatnot. There's going to be a room for that in cannabis as well, I think.
Now, you're still in New Jersey now, right?
Yes.
And New Jersey did pass recreational, but an interesting development out of that, 70% of the towns in New Jersey rejected adult use, which was a very strange thing when it was legalized recreationally. What did you make of that?
I think the reason why that happened was because there was an opt-in or an opt-out. They hadn't yet made the rules they hadn't yet made the regulations for cannabis. So towns were forced to say, yes, we want cannabis, before they even knew any of the regulations. So a lot of towns are for it, but they're just waiting for the regulations to come out, then, because there's another opportunity for them to opt back in. So it's one of these situations where, the towns that are desperate, that really need the funds for cannabis, are going to jump on and say, yes, we want it, we don't care. But the other towns that are a little bit more discreet, that are a little bit more, weary of the situation, even though, you look at Colorado, you look at California, you look at all the other states where these recreational dispensaries are, and, crimes went down because of the cameras and because of all this stuff. Property values go up, and, crimes actually gets more solved because the police have access to these videos, and these dispensaries are like, they're like Big Brother. They got cameras everywhere. So if anybody drives by these areas after any kind of crime. They just go to the dispensary, look at the cameras, and say, "Oh, the car was this." I mean, it's a real good thing for the community in terms of solving crimes. And I just think that there's a lot of good things that can come out of this thing. And a lot of these towns need to just, I know it's not easy for them because politically, there's still that stigma.
It's the stigma
that we all are still
that
dealing
you were
with.
Susceptible to into your 40s.
Hook, line, and sinker. I was hook, line, and sinker. I was not going to get anywhere near this stuff. And it's funny because my wife was the first one to kind of, get into the gummies or whatever. And I was like, no way, it's a gateway drug, blah, 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 blah. And then after I talked to her about it, like I said, I did some research. I'm like, I felt like the biggest jerk. Like I was like, you're talking about something I know nothing about. And I never like to be that way. I always like to have some sort of frame of information to have real intellectual discussions.
So now you like a nice gummy or a brownie or a cookie, or what's our thing?
I'm in the gummies, and I like the vape pens. Yeah, the vape pens, to me, that's clean. If you get a good vape pen, a good cartridge from a reputable company that's tested and regulated, and they don't use the vitamin E acetate, you should be fine.
That stigma that kept you from trying it, do you still feel the stigma? Do you still hide it, your use of it? Or do you feel like that stigma has now worn off, at least in your world?
In my world, it's definitely worn off. I don't hide it. I'm very quiet, private person as it is. But I mean, do I hide it? I don't know if I hide it. I hide everything, I guess. I don't know.
Well, you're here on this program, so you're not being too discreet.
Exactly.
I hear some activity in the house, so we'll about wrap it up. Where do you think the industry is going? Is it in the flower? Is it in the edibles? Is it in the beverages, the topicals? What interests you the most about the future of the business side of it?
I think the interest me is that there's so much more that we can learn about the plant. We can really get into looking at all the cannabinoids, what they do, how they interact with each other, and then the terpenes, how does that work together, and all the different areas of the plant. And I think it's one of these situations where you're on the cusp of something really special that can help a lot of people, and just getting people off of opioids, getting people healthy with this medicine. I think that it's very exciting because I think all these different antidepressants and all these different opioids I remember taking after my knee surgery. I had an opioid and I was scratching and itching because I had a bad reaction to it. There's got to be a better way, and I think this is the better way.
You were one of the athletes that signed a petition to get the WADA to drop cannabis from the banned substances, which doesn't make any sense at all. It's supposed to be two of these three: performance enhancing, harmful to the athlete, or violates the spirit of sport. At best, it's one of those, and one that doesn't even have a true definition. Do you think WADA will drop it from the banned list, or do you see any hope for that? We thought Sha'Carri Richardson would be more of a change element, but I don't think she will be.
I don't think the whole purpose of Sha'Carri was, I don't know. I felt like it was like I don't want to say a punishment, but I think it was like, she's out there. Like, she's out there. She's doing her own thing. She's flamboyant. She's all, I think it was more of one of those things where they were like, let's just, let's kind of curb this thing before she gets totally out of hand. Personally, I don't think how it's a performance enhancement. I don't know, the spirit. Spirit
of the sport doesn't make any sense. It
doesn't really.
It's a catch-all. That's why they have it in there.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I hoped she would push for more change, but she really just kind of took her lumps and wanted to move on with her racing career, which I understand. All right. Quickly, I want to ask you about the 2007, the Super Bowl season. I was covering the Patriots that year, so I'm always a little bit bitter about it. Being at the Super Bowl, we were ready to run on the field and cover perfection and interview Brady. you guys changed our plans. What's your favorite story from that Super Bowl or that season that really tells the tale of that group?
We won the Super Bowl, right? This is how good of a guy Brady is, right? So we win the Super Bowl. They lost, their perfect season. And I'm walking towards the bus after the game, like on cloud 9. And I hear this, "Hey, Monty." And Tom comes off his bus, comes up to me and goes, "Man, you know what? You've had a great career. I'm really proud of you." Because we're from the same area. We're from the Bay Area. He's like, "I'm really proud of you." And I'm just sitting there like, wow, like he's such a better man than me. I could not do that. I would be in the bus crying, not crying, but I'd be in the bus like, dang it, like you had an opportunity for greatness. But yeah, like, so he came off the bus, talked to me, shook my hand, congratulated me. And I was just like, this dude is amazing. Right? I know me. I'm a sore loser. There's no way I could have done that. So yeah, that's my Brady story.
You had to wonder at some point of that game, you didn't think you were going to win it though, right? You could admit that.
I didn't. I honestly, because I was so traumatized from my first experience in the Super Bowl when we lost to the Ravens in 2000 that I didn't care about anything. I just was like, Lawrence Tynes kicked the game-winning field goal for us to go to the Super Bowl in Green Bay in the freezing cold, and everybody's jumping around. And my first reaction was, oh, darn, we're going back to the Super Bowl. Because I was just so traumatized from that. And the fact that, hold on a second. Sorry about that. And the fact that we had an opportunity to win. Let me start this off. 1 second.
That's all right. We got some family.
Yeah. You got to
say hello.
No, we'll close the door. And sorry, let me pick that back up. And the fact that I was just so traumatized from that Super Bowl that I was excited that we went to the Super Bowl, but I was like, oh, darn, we're going back. Oh, no. And then we're playing the undefeated Patriots. So like everybody was excited. And I'm just like, look, we won this game. We won the NFC Championship, but there's nothing worse than losing a Super Bowl. And so I kept telling people, you don't want to lose this thing. We're going to go there and give it our best shot. People let us down. We were 14-point underdogs. And we had just played them the last game of the year.
Yeah.
And so we knew that we matched up well with this team. And I just remember thinking, did everybody take crazy pills? They barely beat us. We put up 30 points on them. And all of a sudden, now we're going to lose by 14. This is crazy. So we felt disrespected, which helped us. We felt a fear of getting embarrassed because they put 50 on Washington, a team that beat us. So we were, it was all on edge. Like it was not a comfortable situation going through those playoffs. It was not a comfortable situation going into that game. We were desperate, fighting for our lives, so to speak. And for us to win, it was just, I didn't even think about winning. I just thought about playing hard, and everybody just thought about playing hard until the very end. And when the dust settled, we were winning. We were winners.
I will never quite get over it. That was my moment to cover. I mean, Brady got over it. He's won 7. I never had to have a moment like that would have been. Well, Amani Toomer, it's been a great pleasure talking with you. The all-time leading receiver in Giants history in catches, in yards, in touchdown catches as well, and a future star in the cannabis industry. Can't wait until our paths cross in that regard as well, my friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate the time.